Today, we're diving into the big ideas from Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Now, it's not about being a total jerk or indifferent to everything. It's actually a pretty smart, counterintuitive guide to living a better life by figuring out what's actually worth caring about. So let's start with a question that probably hits close to home for a lot of us. We have more choices today than at any point in history. What to study, where to live, who to be. Logically, we should be the happiest generation ever, right? And yet, so many of us feel more stressed, more anxious, and weirdly unfulfilled. What is going on? Well, according to Manson, the problem is surprisingly simple. We just care about too many things. We're trying to give a damn about every new opportunity, every social media trend, every single opinion from every person we've ever met. We're spreading ourselves so thin, we end up feeling exhausted and chasing a million little things instead of the few that really, truly matter. So what's the solution? Well, it all starts with a pretty radical idea. You can't get rid of problems, so you have to learn to choose them. This brings us to the first big concept, choosing your struggle. See, the goal isn't a life with no problems. Manson says that's a fantasy. The goal is to find problems you actually enjoy solving. Think about it. For a gamer, beating a tough level is a fun challenge. For someone who hates video games, it's just frustrating. The power isn't in avoiding the struggle. It's in picking a struggle that feels worthwhile to you. Let me tell you a great story that illustrates this. You've got two musicians, Dave Mustaine and Pete Best. Both of them got kicked out of bands that became, absolutely legendary, Metallica and the Beatles. Mustaine went on to form Megadeth and sold 25 million records. Huge success, right? But because his core value was always about being bigger than Metallica, he spent his life feeling like a failure. Pete Best, on the other hand, eventually chose different values. He prioritized a happy home and family. And you know what? He found it and lived a genuinely content life. Same setback, totally different values, and completely different outcomes. That story is the perfect lead-in to our next section, the value of values. Because if your values are the measuring stick you use for your own life, you better make damn sure you've got a good one. Manson points out a few common values that he calls, well, shitty values. Things a lot of us chase that ultimately make us miserable. Take pleasure. It feels great, sure, but it's temporary. Chasing pleasure all the time just leads to needing more and more to get the same hit. It's a dead end. Same with material success. Research shows that once your basic needs are met, having more stuff doesn't really make you happier. And of course, needing to always be right or constantly comparing yourself to others, like Dave Mustaine did, that's just a guaranteed recipe for unhappiness. So, how do you pick better values? Manson gives us 3 simple tests. Good values have to be grounded in reality, they should be socially constructive, and, this is the big one, they have to be immediate and something you can control. Let's take honesty. It's real, it helps society function, and it's something you can choose to do in any given moment. It's not dependent on anyone else. That's a solid value. Okay, so once you've chosen your struggles and you've got your values sorted out, there's one more massive mindset shift you have to make, and that's taking full 100% responsibility for your life. The story of William James is just wow. This guy was born into a super wealthy family, but he was completely miserable. He was sick all the time, had no direction, and was even thinking about suicide. He felt like a victim of his bad health and his family's expectations. But then he read a philosopher and had this epiphany. He decided that for 1 year, he would act as if he were 100% responsible for everything in his life. That single decision changed everything. He went from being on the brink of suicide to becoming one of the fathers of American psychology. And James's story gets at a really crucial distinction. We don't always control what happens to us. Bad things happen, but we always control how we choose to interpret what happens and how we choose to respond. That's what taking responsibility means. It's not your fault, but it is your problem to solve. And that's where all your power is. But why is this so hard for us? Manson has his name for it. The law of avoidance. It's this deep-seated instinct we all have to run away from anything that threatens the story we tell ourselves about who we are. For example, an artist might never show their work to anyone because if people hate it, it could shatter their identity as a talented, undiscovered artist. It's easier to just avoid the risk. So how do you fight that? Well, Manson suggests we borrow a powerful idea from Buddhism. Accept that your identity is just an illusion. These labels we give ourselves, I'm a successful person, I'm an unlucky guy, they're just mental stories. They aren't concrete reality. When you let go of those rigid definitions, you become free. You can try things, fail, and learn without your entire sense of self being on the line. It's incredibly liberating. And all of this leads us to the final and maybe the deepest part of this whole philosophy. It's about how we deal with the one thing none of us can avoid, our own mortality. The anthropologist Ernest Becker had this idea he called immortality projects. He argued that because we're the only animals who know we're going to die, we spend our lives trying to build something that will outlast us, a conceptual version of ourselves. This could be getting famous, building a business, having our name on a building, creating great art, anything to feel like we'll live on. But here's the problem. This desperate chase for a legacy, this fear of being forgotten, is a huge source of our modern stress. It makes us care about things like fame or status that don't actually make our present lives any better. We sacrifice today for some imagined future where people remember our name. The antidote, according to Manson, is simple, but it's not easy. It all comes down to this number, 1. You get one life. That's it. Instead of obsessing over some imagined legacy, the real work is to accept our own impermanence and focus on the here and now, this one precious life that we actually have. And that is the final thought I want to leave you with today. It's a question for you to really think about. If you just stopped, if you stopped worrying about the legacy you leave behind and what people will think after you're gone, what would you choose to give a fuck about today, right now, in this moment? What struggle would you choose then? Because that's the question that really matters.